Seek, above all, for a game worth playing.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Make Yoga Magic Again, the official podcast of Ritual Embodiment and the House of Mages. I'm your host, Daniel Erulian Cuming. My guest for this episode is none other than the Wizard of Mt Ninderry himself, Gwyn Williams. Gwyn began his first steps into the foundation of the ZenThai art form in his teenage years with a fascination and complete absorption with life force energy. A self-confessed life force fanatic, his earlier years involved him using the life force to fight and compete as a serious martial artist and later a competitive mountain runner. The focus was on expanding ki. However, when he later moved into alternative therapies and yoga in 1997, he realized that the real focus needed to be on sustaining and containing life force energy to utilize its full power. This is carried through to the present day, sharing the importance of embracing a yin and yang aspect in daily life. After graduating from the Queensland College of Oriental Medicine and beginning a clinical practice as a Zen Shiatsu therapist in the late 90s, Gwyn began exploring the integration of traditional Thai massage. In 2002, he ventured further afield and began the first of his now annual trips to Thailand to train under the masters. It was one of these expeditions he discovered osteopathy and soon began to integrate this work with his background in clinical practice as an Oriental therapist. Hence, the seed of ZenThai had been planted. There are many more of Gwyn's qualifications, achievements, and facets that I could mention, but let's dive straight into the podcast with him. Gwyn Williams, how are you, brother? Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Nice to be with you. Nice to share some time with you.
Yeah, I've been wanting to chat with you for quite a while. So how you kind of came into my awareness, I'd heard your name around the coast years and years ago when I kind of early in my yoga teaching journey. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how you came up. So some fellow yoga teachers were talking about you, and how it actually came up was they said that they really liked what you do as far as the Chinese medicine side of it, but they were confused and had some opinions on how you were weaving it into yoga. Mm-hmm. And obviously their perspective from the sounds of their voices was that it didn't belong in yoga. And mm-hmm. I had differing opinions, and I still do massively, but it kind of led me, I mean, not just that, it's been a million of different things. But so I was curious. So I ended up going to one of your yoga classes, and I loved it. It was one of the best yoga classes I've ever done. And what I've realized over time, and a big part of this podcast, and the reason it's called Make Yoga Magic Again, is I'm trying to really educate or re-educate or just bring some awareness to people of the broad scope of yoga. And I think it's really interesting that from my perspective, you're actually really staying true or reigniting yoga with a lot of the original intentions of it. Whereas their perspective of yoga was, you got to do the sun salutations, the ancient sun salutations that were developed about 100 years ago or whatever. And, it's just interesting that people's perspective of yoga is really based on the small little snippet of it they know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's so many questions I want to ask you, and I will get into them eventually, but I thought we'd just start with, how did you get into doing what you're doing now? So you're running ZenThai trainings. That's obviously the main thing you're doing. You're teaching yoga classes. You're doing a lot of different things. So I'd love to just, wherever you want to start with how you ended up kind of doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you've opened up at this question or this explanation of how you met me, because it's probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the words and terms and all these things that we use today, or no matter what, even in yesterday, can really confine and suffocate things. So when we use the term yoga, it's really good to, it's like when we use the term God, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Using these terms in very wide fields, and what are we actually talking about when we say yoga? So the first thing I suppose for me is to look at how yoga came to me, and look at where yoga does get misused. So those students that you spoke to, or those friends of yours having some delusion, I completely am compassionate around that, because sometimes I see great things like yoga getting diluted, and I understand that can be a concern. But if you see that teachers or practitioners or advocates of an art grab something and really embrace the essence of it, embrace the essence of God, if you like. It doesn't really matter. Does it have to be a religion? Does it have to be that term? But embrace the essence and then make it applicable to the people around them and the time around them. I feel they're doing a good thing as long as the essence of the work is there. So if you look at the essence of yoga or yoking, which is about connecting to who we are, connecting to who we are beyond the husk, connecting to us as humans, bringing together to yoking. If you look at connection, that's been the basis of my work from the beginning, because I'm a bodywork therapist. And the whole thing about Shiatsu is two bodies really one. So if you look at the essence of bodywork, it's trying to get disconnect or separation out of the way, come back into this unified presence. So I would say my bodywork already had those yogic, if you like, essences around it. And then I moved into yoga and I went, so this is a similar sort of conversation. Obviously, it's got a tradition around it of asana and meditation and drishti and all these other 8 limbs of Patanjali that he's brought in. Obviously, got this essence around it, but the actual core of it is getting away from our separateness, which is suffering, into unification, which is freedom. It's the same. So I suppose that's where I found yoga and the work I was doing, sitting in the same ship. And my whole practice, I suppose, of moving into body work and moving into movement. I've used movement-based therapy as my art these days, so I don't get caught in purists. Because I understand purists have their arguments, but I don't want to waste my time trying to explain myself. So it's a movement-based therapy with asana as a big part of it.
Yeah.
But really, it's using presence and mindfulness and rest and getting away from restlessness, so we can come back to essence. And that's what we're doing in all our movement and all our body work, really. So that's what's got me into it. I like I said, I started with Zen Shiatsu, and then it moved into Thai massage and then osteopathy, and then on that path, which was probably training with some of your teachers. I think Michael Daly was your teacher. So he was with my best friend, my teacher. So I've met all those guys. And along that path, I dived into, lots of yoga. And I've questioned some, to tell the truth, I've questioned some practices out there that call themselves yoga. And if they don't have the essence in it. So,
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, well, because I did do my original yoga teacher training with Michael and Vanessa, but I've really dived, like before that and since, dived into classical tantra.
Oh, okay.
And so Christopher Wallace is a big teacher, like mentor of mine and influence. And it's just so interesting seeing the cross parallels between, you've got the 3 bindus, right? As the 3, because as I understand it, we've got the 3 bindus, which are pretty much identical to the 3 dantian. And then from there, the energy body can split up into chakras, and they're the next focal points. And then you've got the nadis and meridians. And he even says, Christopher Wallace even says that the classical tantra and yoga have really dived into chakras really well, and the nadis to a certain extent. But if you really want to get a good, proper education in nadis and meridians, then go to Chinese medicine. There's so much cross parallel, like how yoga went to China and kind of got mixed with Tai Chi, and you've got Qigong. And it's just really interesting, like something you touched on earlier, having to call it movement-based therapy. The fact that, you have to call it that, yet, you can get approved, like Yoga Alliance, right? Because I run yoga teacher training, and it's been a really interesting process seeing what Yoga Alliance is okay with and what it's not okay with. For example, I can't teach any Qigong or Tai Chi based movements, which is my background before yoga, but, I can teach other things that have much less basis in yoga. Like I can teach the rainbow chakra system that has no evidence of existing before about 100 years ago. There's no evidence of any rainbow chakra system, yet we're allowed to teach that as a traditional yoga practice. Yet if you talk about meridians, if you talk about, Qigong or any of that sort of stuff, you're not allowed to have that in a yoga, So it sounds like you've had a bit of a experience trying to navigate that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely anti-authority for sure, because anything that even using terms of not allowed, and who's making those decisions anyway, and are we allowed to breathe, and this whole institution-based mentality, and then all these things. I've got a prescription that's going to fix you. All this stuff that we get conditioned to as I've got older. I've had to really undo the conditioning, or otherwise we're just. We are unconsciously conditioned, and then we're dictated by authority. So I'm watching all those sort of things play out. So I have been purposely a rebel, and I want to encourage everyone else to do so, to question out there. We're encouraged to do that. That's how we evolve. We have to question. And even when you bring up the word Tantra, some people are like, oh, what's Tantra? Then all of a sudden you've got this all sexuality-based consciousness that's entwined in there again. Then other people's obviously, like you said before, their backgrounds or their unconscious conditioning is stepping in and making judgments. So, it's all wrapped up in that. So, to me, I probably have had some resistance in the early days about what I can and can't do, but I've just thrown it all in the garbage can basically, and just say, well, I'm creating a hybrid system, and I'm tapping into all the really realized masters that have been before me and all the experiences being before me. And I'm going to contradict myself as I go as well, because that's what we're doing. I love this line of Walt Whitman's. Do I contradict myself? Very well. I contradict myself. We are vast. We contain multitudes.
Yeah.
And that's liberating, because, not to say that I don't find things that really work and stick with them, but it seems that we are always in the world of possibility, and we're not being confined by
100%.
again institutions and labels and definitions and names, because we're so much more than that.
Yeah, and I think it all just comes from people misunderstanding, like getting a perspective on what it is. Like even you saying Tantra and the connection to sexuality, a lot of people don't realize that, and like a lot of the sexuality aspects is from Taoism or like Taoist Tantra, not necessarily from yogic Tantra, even though there's a lot of cross parallel. Like sexuality practices are much less, like most of neo Tantra, modern Tantra is a lot of like Mantak Chia stuff, right? A lot of the microcosmic movement and so there's so much cross parallels that you're obviously very aware of, and how big, like how much we don't realize how much Taoism has actually influenced a lot of the modern ideas of yoga.
So, when you bring up these terms like yoga and people question, I'll say, well, I'll question them back, well, tell me what yoga is to you, and then we'll see if we're sitting on the same page, because what the actual thing is from one person to the second person could be two different things. You could be talking about a dog and a cat, because something's what it is by one person's perspective, and something else is, this is my experience, I've fabricated this, and now it sits in this in my mind. So what is real and what is actually being fabricated through your thoughts and experiences could be two different things. Well, it always is two different things.
Well, I'd love to expand on your definition of what yoga is, because you said, I listened to one of the podcasts you've done before. I think I only was able to find one, but you said something in there that I haven't really heard anyone say, and it's very much the way I view it, right? So I was introduced to yoga through Western occultism and through my Kung Fu and Tai Chi training, right? And so magic or Western occultism is this idea about uninstalling your default operating system or software and installing new software, choosing your software. And you said something in the podcast, which I've never heard it said like that, was so simple but so, I think, profound, is you said something along the lines of your software ends up affecting your hardware or changing your hardware. And I think that's sums up how I view yoga. Like yoga to me is unpacking or ripping out the default operating system and consciously choosing like your new operating system. So I'd love to expand on like what your whole view of yoga would be. If someone's never heard of yoga before and you had to explain it to them, how would you explain it?
Yeah. I think the first thing we've got to recognize that there is, like, I wouldn't say I've got this massive big background in yoga. My main background is in Chinese medicine, but I've played with a lot of yogis. I've been playing different yoga schools over the years. I've dived into the arts in many different some more serious, some more devotional, some more bhakti, some more asana, some more physical. But the ones that I'm just saying that really sink to me, that have really got the essence of it, have got this practice of simply quietening the mind, quietening the thoughts, and then coming to, I would say, some sort of state, you could call it awareness or consciousness, that's beyond the realm of thought, and sitting in that space and allowing that clarity to come through. I would say that's what yoga is really. It's coming into these deeper states so you can see what's really, I would say, beneath the veils, when the chitta or the vritti, when the vritti starts to slowly quieten, the chitta or the heart essence starts to come through, and you can really see this. I would say in a way it's an emptiness that's there that allows us to be a lot more vast. I would say in many ways we move beyond a world of thoughts into something that is beneath that, and I think
create more possibility.
Yeah. Well, like I like this line: are we going to shrink who we are to fit what's probable, or are we going to expand our mind to step into what's possible? So there's an expansion there.
Yeah.
And as far as the hardware and the software is concerned, this is an energetic-based system. We're going back to, I wouldn't say go back, but we're mingling Chinese medicine in there. Chinese medicine is a energy-based system where it's actually looking at the energetics. They're feeling pulse. They're looking at your tongue. They're feeling the meridians. They're watching your body. So we're tapping into the energy of the body, what it's doing in a vibratory way. The software, what energy is vibrating like before it moves into tissue. Once it's into tissue, now it's into hardware, and now it's more difficult to deal with. So, for example, something like cancer, if we went into cancer before it moved into tissue, into some sort of tumor, there would have been some dampness in the body. And before that dampness in the body, there would have been some disharmony around holding on to fluids. So if we can get it that the body, in between the cells is holding the fluids, now we've tapped into a software. Why is fluids getting stuck in the body? And we can feel that through pulse and vibrations. We deal with it in that software. It doesn't move into a tumor. Now it's in the hardware, more difficult to deal with. So I feel the whole thing for all of us is that we can take a whole lot of a handhold on our life and our health and our well-being if we put our hands up into where our intention is and where our attention's going, and then we can deal with the vibratory forces around that. It doesn't have to move into these deeper layers of darkness or deeper layers of tissues where now it becomes a real problem to deal with, and you're going to the chemist to try and work something out with a red rash. Start to listen to that state of the mind where it's not in you could say in upeka or equilibrium, where it's not in that harmonic state, and deal with it there, and then it doesn't have to fixate in a body somewhere. It's tricky.
Yeah,
you've got to say
100%.
Everything's happening in your body. You can't go blame the wheelbarrow wheel around over your foot, or you can't go blame the person that said something to you. Everything is to deal with your response to circumstance, and that asks people to be really responsible and really take ownership. So it's empowering in many ways, but it also can be very confronting for people at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with like everything you were saying. I'd love to expand on it. And like you said, giving attention and intention. And I think the last part, you always say you have to give it attention, intention, and then repetition. I think is the thing that is important. Like the analogy I usually use, because did you ever have one of those plasma TVs when they first came out?
I haven't. I'm not a big TV guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't really strike me as a big TV guy, but they used to burn. So if you left them on and there was a static image, they would actually burn that picture in the glass.
Wow.
They'd have to be there. They'd have to. That's why they didn't last. Like plasma TVs were just like a 1 or 2 year thing, and then they don't make them anymore because if you left like the DVD screen on, they would actually burn the symbol into the thing. And
there you go.
That's why I think people. It's subtle in that it sneaks in because you don't realize that you've got that static image or that static identity that's burning a hole into your physical body through the energy body. And so I'm really interested to dive into how you perceive the energy body. I know that's a huge question and probably multiple podcasts worth of question, but I think my main question is what's your perspective on the malleability of it? Because, when we talk about chakras and even meridians and things, people have different perspectives. Some people will say, no, everyone has these chakra points as a default. Everyone has these meridians as a default. Whereas the other school of thought is that your energy body is just completely whatever you want to make it and whatever you work on actually installing. Because I've worked with different chakra systems. Like, I've worked with the 7 chakra rainbow system, but my main system is the 5 chakra system based on classical Tantra and Tibetan Buddhism. But, I can change my chakra system by my intention through my energy body. So what is your perspective on, say, like the objectivity of a chakra, of meridians, of nadis, versus the complete malleability of those internal energetic systems depending on what you're trying to achieve, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So like going back to beforehand, my background in the 90s when I first started up in alternative medicine was in Zen Shiatsu. So Zen Shiatsu is acupuncture without needles, really. So it's based around the whole energy system of well, you could say not so much TCM, but 5-element theory. So which is a little different than traditional Chinese medicine. 5-element theory gets mixed into it, but the 5-element theory basically, it's the whole dance between yin and yang. So it's a little different. So when we talk about chakra systems and nadis, we'll move more down an Ayurvedic sense, okay, which is working more with nadis. When we start talking about meridians and pressure points, we're moving into the principle of yin and yang. So it's a little different the way that it works, because now you're working into excess and deficiency, male and female, and you could say in your school, Shiva and Shakti. So there is some similarities there, but they're not bringing the I haven't got a background in the chakra system. I've played with it in yoga schools, but I don't dive into it like you do in Tantra yoga for sure. It's really based around yin and yang, and so it's always talking about coming back into balance, because there's always a little bit of yin and yang, and there's always a bit of yang and yin, and we're always seeing this. I would say we need to lose our balance to find our balance. So in a way, we're always doing this pendulum swinging. But if it's going all the way over here and this whole big swing into this side, and then it's really out of balance and you don't catch it, and then you've got to bring it all the way back into this side. So we want to keep this. Obviously, it's, as you can see in the yin yang, there's a little dot in the black in the yang, and there's a little black dot in the yin. So there's always a bit of yin and yang, but we don't want that pendulum swinging too widely. So to put that in a practical sense, I would say first there was one. So there was one, and they said then there was two, then there was three, then there were millions, and then there was one again. So what they're saying in that is that when there was one, there was Taoism, which is that unification, which is yoga. We're all one. We're all in this one essence. Then there was two. Then there was male and female. There's Shiva and Shakti. There was yin and yang. Then there was three. So it has to go around the center. So we have the center now, which they say is our earth groundedness. So if you look at that in a 5-element theory, we say that there was, there is sunset and sunrise, and in the middle of that is the earth energy. So we're moving from yin and yang around the center, and you call that the earth, which is our still center.
Yeah.
So basically the whole energetics of that is when we descend down from midnight to midday, which is, you could say ascend from midnight to midday. When we ascend, which is sunrise time, we have another element known as wood. And then we come down from midnight into midday, which is that sunset time. We have another element there that's called metal. So there's a whole lot of emotional energies and emotional essences that are based around these 5 elements. The yin being water and the yang being fire, and then the earth in the middle, and then ascending being wood and descending being metal. And if you look at that energetic system, we're now starting to play with a whole lot of emotional energy, a whole lot of food, a whole lot of tissues, a whole lot of organs, a whole lot of thought patterns, a whole lot of psyche. So you could say energetically, we're trying to bring some harmony through the body to tapping into the principles of those elements, if that makes sense. So that's how we bring harmony to the body. Energetic harmony is look at the principles of those 5 elements and live and think accordingly to those elements. And you'll see that in longevity. A good sign of that is that the people that live the longest are people that get the 5 seasons or the 4 seasons really well in their life. They have a really distinct summer, they have a really distinct spring, they have a really distinct autumn, they have a really distinct winter, and they live according to those seasons. And they're the Hungsies and the ones that live the longest in this planet, because they're living according to the elements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And what's an example of what that may look like in each season for you?
Yeah, well, I would say, it could be a longer picture, but let's say in the winter, which is coming out, it's just slowing things down, doing some more soups, eating some more salty food, being a little quieter, making sure you're hitting the stop button, doing a review. You could say the totem of it is the turtle, so you've got to be a bit like turtle. And then now we're moving into spring, so the essence of spring, we're moving into this green. We've got the green grass coming out of the ground, so we've got this bit of this upward energy. Great time to do a cleanse, great time to start eating some greens, great time to have new ideas, new visions, new place. But, we've got that energy around it. We've got a spring in our step. And you could say in those times, it's a great time to detox. We can start, the facial part of that is the eye. So start seeing through different eyes. So it's a time to get new ideas and new plans, start a new podcast together, whatever you want to do. And then we'll move into summer. Summer's a celebration time. It's a good time to dance and express and play, and we're coming into that as well. And then we'll move out of that. People get locked in. Celebration and dancing and festivals and party can be very alluring, very magnetic, and we can get locked into that. And then don't forget that you've got to come down out of that and come to that sunset time, which will be autumn, where you just go back to what's essential and things, come back and start this. If you like, the middle time is about falling away, letting things go, hang on to what's essence or essential, start to do some, do some good, I would say, yielding and releasing. And you see this happening in autumn when they start to simplify their life a little bit. So they're the 4 seasons, and then we could say that the earth element, which represents stillness and groundedness, you could play that guy out at the end of each one of those seasons. So just before we move into spring, or just before we move into summer, just before we move into winter, just before we move into autumn, it's good time to bring in earth energy, which is just a grounded time where you eat root veggies, get close to the earth, take your shoes off, and they call it the harvest time. Harvest, get some stillness, get some groundedness before you move into this next chapter of the year. So that's an energetic summary of the 5 elements. But there's organs, there's food, there is senses. If you've done any yin yoga, you would know all the meridians. There's twists, like the whole ZenThai flow you're talking about. All our movement patterns are around these elements. So there's twisting for wood element, there's grounding for the earth element, there's a lot of on the floor for the earth water element, there's a lot of arm balances if you move in a fire element. So even the body parts that you could move around can be in accordance with the elements as well. Yeah. So it's a little different than this chakra system, which is based around something very subtle, move into something that's very gross.
Yeah. And I like, because that for me is a big part of yoga, taking these conceptual ideas and almost using them as a holding storage house for different ideas. So, for example, what each element represents, you could break that down and put it into categories and just have the words and not have the visuals and the and the analogies and all that sort of stuff. But I think those analogies, those visuals, those concepts, they're almost necessary to drop them deeper into the body, because they, and that's why I think some people don't they're like, oh, I just want to learn the thing. I don't care about the elements. I don't care about these visuals and all that sort of stuff. But to me, they're the storage houses. So like water, you know, you have all the wisdom of water, and then you put it in water, and soon you don't need the words. You don't need like the intellectual understanding. You just need to feel what that element is. And yeah, because I'd love to dive in it, because I think that's something that people, unless they've really spent time with a system, they don't understand the necessity and the benefit of having like elemental storage houses or conceptual storage houses in your body.
Yeah, we've got to understand the human condition. The human condition will run away from something that's complicated. It'll gravitate to something that's simple. So I say to my teachers, because I spend most of my time teaching teachers now, if you can't explain it to a 12-year-old, you don't really know it well enough yet. You need to have it in that vocab. And that's what you're saying. Let's give it in a language that is very digestible in the moment. You know, before I was into this work, I used to teach primary school physical education, so I love simplifying. I love simplifying the practice. So, you give it to people. You know, and I just say, give it to people in qualities. This is the qualities that you can now start introducing into your practice. This is the qualities you can start bringing into the way that you think. These are the qualities into the food that you eat. This is the qualities that you can start inviting into your day, and see how you go. And that's all people really need. And then when you have this idea of these qualities, you've really got the essence of the energetics. So that's a really great way for people to be, if you like, introduced to it, and then also become interested into it. Otherwise, you know, the mind will only go with what's familiar. It won't go to something that's unfamiliar. So you're going to meet at the mind, the human mind. It's familiar. Otherwise, it's just going to bring out that blanket. I'm not interested in that, like you just said. I just want to go to what I know, which is just the human condition. So let's start. Well, do you know what soft means? Let's start with soft. Okay. Let's start with. Well, if we go from that, let's go into gentleness. Okay. Then let's go to the opposite of that. Okay. The opposite of that is fear. So I've gone to soft, into gentleness, and now fear. I've also gone into deep quietness and depth. So now I've just given you 4 or 5 qualities of the water element. Let's not go any more than that. Let's play with those qualities now.
Yep.
That's all we need to know.
Yeah, and I love that so much, and I really appreciate that, because I do see a bit of a, maybe not it's intentional, but say student, like yoga students learn the 7 rainbow chakras, and then they just start to talk about it in class. Like, all right, everyone, we're going to feel into, you know, the sacral chakra, and they just expect everyone to know what that means, or even understand what they mean by what it means, or what they understand. And they don't seem to be able to put that into basic language. And so it sounds like you do a similar thing with your students, because like I use a different 5-element system, but there is crossover. But say I get them to teach an earth element class, but I was like, I want you to teach a really effective, really earth element class, and don't mention the earth element once. You know,
that's great.
So it sounds like you're doing like a similar thing, trying to help them install the concept in their body, but then to be able to then bring that in their own way and use just layman's language.
Yeah. Even the word, chakra for some person, all straight away you can get the blanket come down.
Yeah.
One of my deep friends was teaching in the Silicon Valley. You know, she was teaching to big Google companies, getting paid extraordinary amounts, but she wasn't allowed to use the word connection, because as soon as these white collar workers are hearing the word connection, straight away there's association with hippies or this and that, and she's just doing connection games and doing an incredible job of doing creating group unity and group formulas and getting people to enjoy their work, and Google and all these IT skills were loving her, but there was taboo around the word she could use because of these associations. And so you got to hit people where they're at.
Yeah. So something I want to, it's interesting what, like in the first couple of sentences chatting to you, you said what I love to ask everyone. And, what is God? Like, what does that mean? What does that word even mean? So I'd love to dive into that. And also it's funny, you kind of like preempt a lot of the questions in a way, because what I like to ask people is if the world depended on you explaining, like, very detailed and very understandably to a 10-year-old, what your worldview was, what your view of the soul was, what your view of reality was, what your view of God was, if you use that word. Like, how would you explain that? Because for me, all this work, there's lots of reasons to do all these practices, but for me, the thing that I'm most curious about of people like yourself is how it shaped your worldview. Like, what is your view of life and death and all the processes around and in between all of those? I would love to just get your full, if you can explain what your current perspective of the cosmos is.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that come up there, and I think one of the things that I share with kids and with my students and my teachers is the way that you do one thing is the way you do everything, and that's a real. And when you tap into that, you're getting pretty close to God, I feel, because the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And this is the way that you do life. Don't do it one way because you were told to do it another way. Don't do it one way to make another person happy. Don't do it one way because you're imitating it. Doing one way because that's the way you do everything. And the way that you do everything is the way that we do because we want to make an impact. We do it this way because we want to make an impact. We want to make a mark in our relatively short time here. So the way that we do one thing is the way we do everything. So don't show up unauthentic here and then authentic here because you're wasting your time that first way. Show up every way like that. And then when you show up like that, you can show up, I would like empty, happy, show up empty. So then the full, if you like, cosmos, or you could say God, or the full chi or mana or source energy can pour through you, Hanuman, unimpeded because you're so empty, you're so clear, you show up in that space, you're empty, and essence is just radiating out of you in this very magnetizing way, and now you're making an impact. So you could say now God is being revealed not just through the flower or through the dog or through the mountain, but through the way that you're doing things, which is what you're here to do. You're here to be an expression of the divine, really.
Mm.
So we say, do one thing, like do everything. Be conscious. Pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Be conscious because God is consciousness. So be conscious of the way you do it because that's really what God is. It's being conscious. Is it a father in the sky or that, like a beard? Is it like that sort of guy? Like that's a really nice, I think that's a really nice thing to give a kid because it makes you make these ideals around love and power and you could say service, and they are qualities of God, but it's not God. It's just that's the qualities of godliness pouring out of the person. That person could be you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that is another question. There's quite a few questions I want to ask like around that. But yeah, one of them, I guess, is when we give it a face, when we give it opinions and values, I think it limits it. And my perspective of what I would call God is limitless, but it's a paradox as well, because if it's everything, it's also nothing. And so it's trying to dance around and explain those ideas. One thing just quickly before I forget what I wanted to touch on. So, because what you were saying before, the emptiness and the fullness, two questions here. What does emptiness feel like to you, and what does fullness feel like to you? Why would we, want to experiment with that? What are the benefits there? And I guess what you said is trying to be authentic. And I don't think anyone is consciously inauthentic.
No.
But like, how can someone rein themselves in, throughout that? So there's a few questions that kind of weave together, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, the first question around the emptiness one, that's like you said, that's the biggest paradox there is, because the more empty you are, the more full you are. So because you're sort of getting out of the way, getting out of your own way, to allow this fullness to be expressed. So there's an incredible emptiness that we're asking us to step into. I would say emptiness is about being completely alert. That's probably the best way I see emptiness. It's being this, it's more aligned with alertness. People say empty, I just put my hands up in the air and I can put my feet up and I can just be empty and just zone out. It's the complete opposite. It's actually, I haven't got any narrative. I've got no commentary going on. There's nothing there. So my alert is 100% now. And so now I'm completely full. How am I full? I'm full in the way that it show up. I'm occupying the moment in this fullness. So that's the paradox that you're talking about. And then, so that, I love that. So I put my hand up empty and I kind of keep it really light because I just see how it's like this great paradox. You see emptiness is that, don't take it so serious, which Yogananda would say, and do it like your life depended on it.
Yeah.
It's a great reminder of what you're saying. Don't take it so seriously. Don't get so caught up in all the stories that you've got to do and empty. Don't get so serious. You've got to be, it's everything's going to happen as it needs to happen. It happens as it happens. And be part of the great unfolding and do it like your life depends on it. So show up fully, in this fullness. You're not showing up your body here and your mind in some past or future event. It's like showing up here. That's the emptiness that I like, alertness. And then the second part that you questioned, what was the second part? It's on the tip of my tongue. What was the second part of that question?
Yeah, you kind of answered it anyway. It was just like, I guess, how can you tell when you're being authentic? And I guess it comes to a deeper question as well of like, what is your intuition to you? Like, how do you tap into that? And what is the right decision for you? You know what I mean? That's another whole big question. But The authentic stuff is just like it's impossible to be completely authentic. We learn from imitation. So there's these times where we're just replicating stuff that we've heard and things that we've seen and books that we've read. We're replicating of that. So you could call that inauthentic to a certain degree, but I don't really know if it is, because if you do it with this spaciousness, it'll have a taint of you in it. It might be similar because that person inspired you. Of course, you're going to replicate it and imitate it to a certain degree, but it'll just like have your bit of salt in it, if that makes sense. If someone shows you a recipe and you go and try redo that same meal again, you're not going to be able to do it again. You're going to love it to do it because it tasted so good, but you're just going to bring your flavor into it. So I think where we get caught up when we think we've got to be authentic is that authentic means that this is yours and yours only. It's like, that's ridiculous. It's just going to have a little bit of your uniqueness around it, and that makes it authentic. So there's another play with what is authentic. Just bring a bit of your essence into it. Doesn't mean that it's devoid of all the other inspirations that you've been around. That's impossible to do. It's impossible. It's going to be in there. So that's where that comes in. And then what was that second bit again? I'm just trying to go over some questions. Yeah,
I guess part you asked me that?
I think what a lot of people I see talk about in general life, but also in the spiritual world, is listening to that right voice or your intuition. And it's like, I think everyone thinks that there is one particular voice that is the authority above all others, that is always going to choose the right thing. I don't think it's that simple. But I'd love to go your perspective on that, because it leads me to, like, I guess, what is your view of because I understand like the soul and the cosmos is kind of like this layers system, but you may have a completely different perspective of it. So like, what is the right voice inside you to listen to? What does that mean? What is the soul? What happens after death? How does it like happen? Like, how does it all kind of coincide? Just tiny questions.
I think intuitiveness, again, another one of this word that gets really construed, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this bird looking at me right now. Is it intuitively talking to me? I don't know, maybe the kookaburra on us. It's really, let's remember that we're talking intuitive, so we're talking about a different sense that we're familiar with. We're talking about I wouldn't say that it's not a sense that gets spoken about. It's a sense that we feel and listen to. It's a heart sense. So when we talk about a heart sense, remember that heart doesn't have an issue around time. It can't be in the past and it can't be in the future. Otherwise, we'd all be, I'd be a millionaire if it had a time. I'd be going, okay, I know that dice is going to roll the 6. I'll go down to the casino, I'll make $1 million. So It's impossible to be like that. It doesn't. It's only showing up in the moment. So in a way, it's this bird's just laughing at me when I just said that. So I was on it. So I'm actually listening to nature and how I respond. That's intuitiveness. Nature is responding to me, because nature doesn't have a linear time either. You can if you think about animals, their consciousness isn't based around what happened yesterday. They're showing up fully now. They're using this other sense, and that's why they're incredibly alive and incredibly powerful in the wild unknown, which is where we want to tap into when we're intuitive. I don't know. If I don't know, what am I going to do if I don't know? I'm going to listen to something else that doesn't know, but it senses. It doesn't know, it senses what's going on. And I want to tap into that sense, and it'll give me some clarity. And it's a bit like a muscle. The more and more you tap into that sense, the more and more you'll get better at that.
So my question around that, and to come back to the bird. So the bird, for example, I agree that it doesn't consciously remember what happened, but just say a dog tried to attack the bird yesterday. It might not consciously remember it, but automatically if it sees a dog, it will probably react differently than it did a few days ago.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think the thing that I'm really curious about is, looking at the differences maybe to just a survival instinct response, just so I need to survive, I'm in danger, I need to move. And the difference of some kind of, I guess, higher, if you want to call it, intuitive sense, which is actually, is there a difference? And if there is a difference, how do you know that you're not just responding to maybe previous survival instincts or just trying to protect yourself, where you could be missing out on a bigger opportunity if you overcome that survival instinct and actually listen to a deeper part of yourself? And, is there a difference? And you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's I don't think the animals know where they're moving from a limbic brain response, which is that survival, or they're moving from something that's very just innate. They move from both, basically. They'll move from that limbic survival, and they'll move from a heart intuitive knowingness. But this is the great thing about humans, that we can tap in, we can ask that question. Is this a limbic brain response, which is based around safety, which is flight and fight, what you're talking about? Or is this coming from a different layer? And we need to ask yourself those questions. And the more and more you tap into that, the more you'll get better into it and go, wow, that's from an association that I've had when my partner yelled at me, or when that dog bit me, or whatever you were going on about, or something that I'm doing to keep me safe, or it's a noise at the truck again when I had that accident, or this is coming from somewhere else. It's definitely not there. And the best way I would say about it is that the first one has a sense of contraction and tension around it. There's a bodily contraction, a bodily tension around it, and the other one doesn't have that. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have this contraction tension. It's more like open. There's an open willingness about it, but there's not a bodily contraction around it. And
I love that.
Yeah. So that's why we're probably the only animal that has that sense of discernment, where we can say, "Wow," and question that.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I kind of remind myself, especially when I'm in large crowds, that we are still animals, right? And we still do have these responses, and sometimes we can confuse them, with other things that we give higher authority to, and it's just trying to, but like you said, it's the most serious, important thing that we'll ever do to explore this, and just not getting too wrapped up in it, because otherwise you just miss out on all the play and the good stuff in life. So something I want to ask you, this is relevant too, because you've got a new book that you're working on, and you've also got a couple of other books. And so one question I'd like to ask people, and this can obviously circle back to the books that you are writing or have written, is if you knew you were going to die in, say, a couple of years, and you knew you were going to be reborn, right? And you could leave yourself, your next self, you're going to be reborn, you're not going to have any of your memories, right? But if you could leave a book that some mysterious person in a cool way that's relevant to you will give you a book at, say, the age of 21, what would you write in that book for your next incarnation?
Yeah. That I'm going to read?
That you're going to read. Yeah. But I mean, I guess that, if you are everyone, right? This question can relate to what would you want to tell the world, because obviously what you would want to tell yourself. But think about it as yourself. Like, what would you want to tell a younger you?
Yeah. That's good. I think it's probably a little bit what we've said before. You show up fully. I like to think, take the one seat, just be really open and really willing to put your hand up for everything.
Yeah.
That's definitely one I would say. I would say, use your time intelligently. Don't wait. Use your time intelligently. It's relatively short little chapter. So, use your time intelligently. And
how can you tell if you're using it intelligently?
Yeah, I would say use it. I would say, maybe I would say notice when you're doing something that doesn't serve you. Might be something, and you don't really. I suppose a lot of those things as a young person, you don't know if it's going to serve you or not. So that's an interesting one to have. But I would say, I would definitely say, the same thing. I wouldn't do it too different than I've done it. Just be a little wild and reckless and enjoy yourself. Have a really good time.
Or it's just something, I guess, something to jumpstart your next incarnation, like with a little bit of extra, wisdom, a little bit of extra oomph. And because that's what it seems like as well, a lot of the yogi tradition and even like Taoist traditions and stuff, if they kind of going to keep coming back, they're like trying to improve the next round a little bit more. And so I guess it's like, what do you value to bring more of or to teach yourself in the next round? But so from the sounds of it, it would just be wasting time. So it's like, what's a tool that you could give a avid 21-year-old with a lot of jing that would help them to make more informed decisions?
Yeah, I think just to be really kind to each other. I think that would be the biggest thing, because it's everything. I think something that you may not know when you're immature is that everything that you give out, all the small things are big things. You don't realize that. You don't realize the little words. Just be kind to each other and give out good juju, basically. And that's, you get, especially as a teenager, you get very self-obsessed. Everything you think the world's so evolving around you, and it's all about what you can get rather than what you can give. So, I would say just be kind. Be kind. They're all your friends out there. Your friends. So that would be the thing I would say the most to it, because and to me, and that is using your time intelligently. If you're being kind to someone, that's a smart use of your time.
And how would you respond to someone who's not being kind back?
Being kind, like I wouldn't be caught up in what they're giving to me. Like if someone isn't being kind back to me, I would offer some compassion. Offer some compassion. There may be just a lack of capacity to be kind back. Yeah. Maybe they need a bit more kindness, so may not have the capacity. I wouldn't jump into that back seat or that infant seat where, oh, you're not kind to me, I'm not being kind to you. That's just that's negative. It's, okay, I say we're in the same. We are in the exact same boat, brother. It's just that and I'm just a bit more maybe aware on than you are. So I offer so much compassion, and then if it got to a state where it was destructive or physically harming, obviously I just move myself out of that environment. But in the early stages, it's just offer compassion and bow your head and go. No problem. Maybe tomorrow's a new. Maybe you don't know what that person's experienced the day before.
Exactly.
So maybe tomorrow's a new day. Just because you smiled at them, maybe tomorrow they'll wake up a little different.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree, bro. It's like, if someone cuts someone else off in traffic, that person, next time they have an opportunity to let someone in or not, they might not let someone in, and that perpetuates the cycle. And all it would take is someone to be kind and then have a reverse effect. Suddenly someone lets them in to traffic, and so it makes their day and they let someone else in. It's just but easier said than done in the moment. Sometimes emotions can overcome us, and we're still animals. But
I'll share this little funny story because it sinks into the story before, between heart-based consciousness and being caught in flight and fight. That we were speaking earlier, and it's similar to what we're talking about now in a way, like those two paradigms. And I was at this Bruce Springsteen concert last year. 80,000 people. I went with my friend Simon Park. He loves Bruce Springsteen, and he got me a ticket there. 80,000 people in this Munich Olympic Stadium, and Bruce Springsteen's just electric on stage. 80,000 people. 7 till 10 at night. But anyway, we're trying to get to the front of where he is because and we're trying with these two little yogis sneaking our way through these big, boisterous German guys. Like literally, I'm like 65, 70 kilos. These guys are like maybe 120 kilos. And we're just like cutting in there trying to get to the number one spot. And because they'd been there for like 3 or 4 hours. Anyway, my yogi friends is a little bit more assertive than I am. And then we get to this spot and they've been waiting there for a few hours, and we start tucking in around them and in front of them. And a couple of them started getting a little aggressive. They go, I couldn't speak German, but they'd swear to me in German anyway. Yeah. And I just said, hey guys, just put my hand up. And I just sat there amongst them. So you're here for this 3-hour concert with these guys. Literally, I'm coming up to below their shoulders, bouncing around me to Bruce Springsteen. And I'm just going, okay. But I was just, I didn't tap into this sort of separation, afraid, fight conversation with them. At the end of it, I was just, hey, high five. And I didn't speak word. One of them had me on his shoulders, high five, just because I refused to go there with them.
Yeah.
They were explaining to me about the last 5 concerts of Bruce that they had seen, and we ended up being good buddies. I just didn't go into that conversation with them. I stayed in that hard essence. And then if you stay there, they have to come with you. It might take time, but they have to come with you in the end. So that's a little bit like that, what you're sharing now. And
I love that. And I guess that comes back to your, perspective on being empty. Like, I guess, someone has an action and then you create the story around it. And so the next actions follow that story. And if you being empty, it's just, someone doing something, you remained empty, no story around it, allowed the fullness, like you were saying, that paradox, to have any possibility that you choose, not having they're doing this, they're being disrespectful, I have to take these course of action. So I love that, brother. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. So we're just starting to get towards the end of the podcast. So there's just a couple more questions I want to touch on. I reckon we end with what your books are about, because there is one other thing that I want to touch on, and it's just I think I'm one of the rare people on the Sunshine Coast who hasn't done ZenThai training, right? So it's
what are you doing? What are you doing this year? Come on, get there.
I'll get there eventually. I've considered it a few times, but I'm really curious because you have, you're just a household name on the Sunshine Coast, and to your credit as well, like some of my favorite yoga teachers on the coast, like I'll go to their class and then I'll find out later, like I'll love their class and I'll find out later, it's like, oh, of course they train with Gwyn. But, so I'm just curious to know the challenges that you found in creating a full system. Like, it's a big responsibility because you've really weaved together and synthesized a few different concepts. But, that's the risk, right? When you're putting things together, building a vehicle, it needs to be tested and it needs to be run and it needs to be work for other people. And so what are some of the biggest challenges that you found in building the ZenThai, building the community, building the course, and understanding even like the whole business aspect of it? Just whatever you're willing to share on, some of your biggest challenges that you've overcome.
Yeah. I'm being more in gratitude than challenges. I'm just so grateful for all the gifts that have come my way and the beautiful people I've met and students I've met. And I just call us all spokes in the wheel. I think the reason that the ZenThai culture or the community really evolves, I make it really clear that we're all, the hub of ZenThai is this loving kindness or awareness in the middle, and we're just all spokes. I'm definitely one of the most, influential spokes there, but you're another spoke as well. It's not this pyramid system with me trying to dictate how it's running. Mm-hmm. So just keep, in the middle of the wheel is, Thich Nhat Hanh's quote, when we touch something with awareness, we touch everything. So just having that as in everything, in the yoga classes and the body work, having that as I think that really helps when you have some really good ideals that are really powerful, people can relate to and everyone sings with, it keeps everything together. So that's been great. And I'm so grateful for the wonderful things that's happened. Maybe some of the challenges is with authority, I suppose. There's been some issues with that, trying to work around. Like the Mt Ninderry Healing Centre was my home with me, and I raised all my kids there. And when it was transferring out of being a home into a healing centre, obviously more cars and more structures, and there was a complaint and council interrupted, and so we had to invest quite a fair bit of money to move it into a centre, and a little bit of turbulence in the community there for a little while. That was a little hurdle, if you like. Move it out from being this little hippie hangout into a recognised healing centre. There was, and that similarity is happening in the authorities in Bali, obviously, of what we can and can't do there by, I call it authority bullying. And I understand it in the Sunshine Coast, what goes on. There's we've got to watch what the vehicles do, and we've got to have the right hygiene and right toilets. And, in Bali, it's a different story. I go, wow, just get something, there's nothing black and white there. It feels like I'm always up against some sort of headache with authorities there. So those things have been challenges. I suppose sometimes some of the challenges is not being an octopus.
Yeah.
I want to be like, and my wife reminds me, most importantly is my family. I've got three adult kids now, and being available to her, and time to go surfing, time for myself, and to see lots of clients, and to be at festivals, and to run courses, and now teach internationally. And there's sometimes I could see myself a little bit widespread. Like I've got this, unlimited, I would say, calling on me from around the world to be here, be that, but I've got a limited capacity. So it's having this is where I need to be spending my time. So if that's the case, I've got to give up that. I've got to give up some things that maybe that I don't like giving up, but I need to. So those things have been good. It's a good thing to do. So those things have been a bit tricky. But
because I'm just curious because, you said, I can't remember the exact quote, but in the other podcast I listened to that you did, you talked about how important obstacles are as stepping stones to things, and how to shift that mindset. And I think it is just such an important thing to talk about because, we want to be positive. We want to, have gratitude and all that, but you can still have gratitude for the obstacals and the challenges.
Exactly.
And how have you transmuted that as an opportunity?
Yeah, adversity for sure, I went through a lot of tragedy, as you probably heard in that other podcast. I was actually talking about it today, and I lost my father tragically as a young 12-year-old, and that was a huge tragedy. He was a single father, and he was just killed in a car accident as a 12-year-old. So I had to go through a whole lot of mental and emotional sort of like trauma to pull myself out of that. But the positives of that is that I started questioning, who are we beyond this husk? Who are we really? What are we doing here? And started me to look at this, when you have someone, a massive grief or a loss like that at such a young age, I started to look at this transitional, temporary nature of life, and starting to dive deeper into spirituality. I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if I hadn't had that loss, which is, we're both into yoga, we're into who we are, spiritual beings having a physical experience. And I wanted to understand that rather than this, a physical person having these odd little spiritual moments. So to get a deeper understanding of who we really are and what we're doing here, that started me when I lost my father. So you could say that was a big adversity with lots and lots of gems in it for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to hear that. But like as you said, I usually find that people that do quite epic things in life or have these big awakenings, usually it is a source of stress or a calamity. Like I'm into love of mythology and stuff, and talk about the calamity being that hero's journey moment where they kind of called out by the universe to really search for the meaning of things. And a lot of people don't have that. So I guess my next question would be, something I really struggle with is, people come to yoga for the physical benefits, right? And, we all, once you dive into I guess what you would call the spiritual aspects, we all see the benefits of it. But to someone who has never had that deep pull towards spirituality, at least not consciously, or haven't had a calamity that's made you want to dive deeper, how would you explain to someone maybe the benefits of diving deeper, or what you see the benefits as, if you can even describe them to a 10-year-old or to a 12-year-old?
Yeah. And I always say, like, it's a conversation. People remember the first 5 minutes of the conversation, and they'll usually remember the last 5 minutes of the conversation. That's proven. So how you start your yoga class is really important. And exactly. So it's and there are people out there teaching asana really well, and that might be what their dharma, or that's their reason they're there. They're really great of unpacking the structural practice of asana and really giving great. And they don't need to maybe go into that philosophy that you and I maybe are more interested in. I know that my dharma, my reason for teaching classes is to make people have a different perspective, maybe a little wider view, bring the Chinese medicine in, bring some heart-based consciousness in, to bring some deeper, if you could say, yogic understandings into the practice. That's what I'm teaching there for. I'm not there to make people go deep into Hanumanasana. It's not the reason I'm there. So I make that really clear from the beginning. So I always start a class with the theme. So whatever the theme is, I think the Lana taught 2 days ago was about kindness. So I told the story about, us giving $2 at the toll bridge in Brisbane every time we crossed. And when we gave $2 for the toll in Brisbane to go across, we had to give $2 to the car behind us. That's what we had to do, because we had to give it to the car standing behind us. So it always cost us $4 to go across the bridge.
Yeah.
And so it was like my whole class was about giving $2 away for the people around you.
I love that. So that would have just like shifted. I love those little, because obviously we were talking about it earlier, but those shifts when someone. Yeah.
So you realize, well, okay, what we're doing here, we're bringing in I wouldn't say that I'm teaching people. I would say I'm there to remind people the depth and breadth of it is to be a human being. And because we can easily forget, we can easily get caught up in physicality.
What's something that you could just suggest in a couple of minutes that would help to reconnect us all back to kindness, especially on the days that we're not feeling it? Because, even most of my work now is online. Even here, we both live on the sunny coast, but life has been so busy for both of us that we had to do this via a Zoom call. Even though it's still good, it's still kind of face to face. But what is helping you, or what do you recommend to people to help them like dive back into the humanness in a simple way? And remember that we're all on this mysterious flying rock together, and none of us have it figured out.
I think I could go back to that same question. Is the reason we need to lose our balance? We need to lose a balance to find our balance. So going back to that again. So notice when you're rushing, losing your balance. Notice when you haven't had time for someone, losing your balance. Notice where you didn't have that proper hug, you had eye contact, losing your balance. Notice where you were eating the wrong food. We're all human, make mistakes. Know when you lose your balance and see it. Be awake enough to reflect in it, and then go back into finding your balance. I think that's one. Okay, well, next time I see that person, I'm going to go and just have a bit more spaciousness around them, or I won't rush out of that situation so much. I will listen more and not talk. These things, just listening more and talking less can be very kind.
How do we find that willpower to to do the thing before we need to do it. You know, everyone can start an exercise program or a diet when they're in, like, you know, something goes terribly wrong. But how can we really ignite that fire, that drive to make a change before we have to?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to do is you need to want to. We need to want to. You can't have to, you have to want to. And so then you've got to say, well, if I want to, then what I've got to see where what I'm doing that's not aligned with what I want to do. So the first thing is you've got to muscle up the want. And to me, at the moment, if we all as humanity have a good look at the way that we're doing as a human family, you could say it's not working. So we've got to want to make some change around that. So how do we do that? So then, okay, first we've got to want to change. Okay, I just want to have a little bit more of a deeper connection with nature, a deeper connection with family, a different connection with people. I want to have a bit more space in my life. And I think you'd find that 99.5% of the world would put their hand up for that. And then when you've got the want, and then them ask them, well, how?
Yeah.
And then how are you going to, well, rather than me tell you how you're going to do it, you tell me how you're going to do it. I just want to hear, I want to muscle up the want. I want to get you to want it. Because when you want to do something, you'll find a way.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And it is like, that's one of the great human mysteries. You know, we want something, we want to make this change, we want to do this, want to give this habit up, but yet we continue it. And years later, we're in the same boat unless something really dire happens. Yeah.
I say pay attention to what you're paying attention to. That's what we're not good at. That's where we're getting because we are distracted. We have got so many things distracting us, so much time constraints because all these distractions, all this uncertainty, anxiety. We're not paying attention to what I call the most important thing. I say the most important thing is the most important thing. Don't forget it. Don't forget what the most important thing is. The most important thing. So if kindness is the most important thing, which it is for a lot of us, make sure it is the most important thing is the most important thing. So put time, pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So it's because what you pay attention to, it's no different than a magnifying glass. You pay attention to it and you get a magnifying glass and you just make that bit of sun coming through it. You put on an old leaf, you got a fire going on. It's no different. It's no different.
So if you've wanted to do something or make some change or do some endeavor for quite a while and you found yourself just not making time for it, obviously because it's not that important, but you know deeply that it is important to you and you really want to make a change, but you haven't got that innate enough drive or fire to get that going, but you know 100% this is important, you need to do this. Like, what would you put in place or what would you do to help facilitate that or help to get that more want enough to make it something natural?
The first thing you got to do is throw away the identity that says you don't have the willpower. That's the first thing, because once you step into that, you're just going to keep living that. So that I see that happens a lot. But that person is like this, but I'm not like that. So the first thing you got to throw in the garbage can is the identity or the mental rhetoric that says, I don't have that discipline. I don't have that thing. First of all, do that. Throw that one out.
How would you do that?
I would say notice that you've got a default system going on. Notice you've got a default system and then say, okay, that's not true. That's not true. I've got that default system going on. I've got to say, I've got to look at, see what's not working. Quite often what's not working is the stories that we're telling ourselves about not being able to work, not being able to do it. So the first thing is to look at that. Okay, there's a default commentary, because it's the commentaries and the narratives that are defaulting. It's not what's actually happening. So that's the first thing to do. The second thing, I would be putting yourself in environments that are conducive to that change. You're not going to be able to, you basically aren't going to be able to create this incredible, alternative health food industry if you're still drinking Coca-Cola. So you can't, you got to live it, and you got to put yourself in be around people that are doing bulletproof, foods and organic gardening, and be around those people, and all of a sudden you're living and breathing the things that you want. So put yourself in those environments. So it's a little bit like going back. Once you're in those environments, you'll start talking it. You're talking it and you're getting around environments. So it's not just you that's running the show now. It's us that's running the show. We're doing this together. And so you're not just talking it about when you're putting your suit on. You're talking about it because it's something that you're really passionate about. So build up some passion, put yourself in environments around it, look at things that aren't conducive to it, look at the mental rhetorics that don't serve you. And then I suppose if you go back to my, the book that I was talking about before is to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in yourself, man. Like don't go looking outside yourself for someone else to believe in you. As I said, I want you to believe. No, you got to believe in yourself. You got to build that belief in yourself, and that sometimes that belief sometimes has to be earned. It sometimes has to be earned by persevering through some stuff, so you get that belief. Like it doesn't have to be in the same industry. So, say for example, if you want to have a garden, just put a really good time into growing lettuces. And all of a sudden, you put all that time, you watered it, you've got the good soil, you've got the good seeds, you've done a really good job, they're looking a bit faded, you sort of like put the right nutrients to got them unfaded again, and you had these great lettuces, and at the end, you get the fruit. So then you have this belief, wow, I can do that. And then growing lettuces comes into the same thing, teaching yoga. Then it goes into driving cars, so everything else, being a good orator. Or building a house because you've had some time where you spent some time in it. You went through that. I would say the phases of learning, practicing, struggling, and then thriving. You've gone through that, and you're wow. If I stick at it, it's going to work, and then you'll do it again. But that belief has to be earned. No one else can give that to you.
Yeah. So you just got to. So it sounds. I like it. It's almost like analogous with the be do have model. So you kind of changing your identity. You're doing the steps, like trying to implement, like don't have the Coca-Cola, don't do this, or or the doing is the don'ting as well. And then I guess having those people around you that help facilitate that new identity and those habits and all that sort of stuff as well. Yeah.
And the other one that I reckon really great as well is to stay curious, because there's what works today didn't work 10 years ago, and what's working today isn't going to work in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
So you've got to be staying curious, and I'd love that. I love it. You can't do a formula that worked for me. Like when I moved into bodywork and yoga, it was all I got my name through festivals and workshops. Brisbane Yoga Festival. There was no things out into Instagram and social media, but I got a good exposure by, I think I was teaching or offering talks at a festival, probably. Or doing stuff at markets at least once a week, just being out there in the marketplace. So that's what worked 10 years ago. Now it seems to be, you need to, you probably know, Instagram thing worked, and maybe in 10 years time it'll be something different,
Yeah. Yeah, it is such a different world. Like I come from a lot of face-to-face, like interaction work stuff, and it is just making short little snippet online content these days. And it is a very different game.
Yeah, and staying curious around you too. Like I'm continually reinventing myself. You go, wow, what else is out there? Sure.
Yeah, what is something that's really lighting you up at the moment, as far as your own personal spiritual practices?
Yeah, the mental health thing is lighting me up. I really want to support that area. I've sort of got to a phase in my life where I'm, set up in many ways. I've got a great community. So I'm looking where there's holes. I'm here to help. I'm a Hanuman. I want to help people out. I see a lot of anxious people out there, a lot of people in uncertainty, a lot of people in a chaotic whirlwind, and most of it is unconsciously self-imposed. So trying to give people some ways to perceive life and stay into some type of grounded presence. So I'm working on I'll have my book out by the end of the year. It's going to be the 5 principles of living in an undivided life. So that's where my focus has been a lot this year.
So would you mind sharing what some of those principles are?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we've been speaking about yeah, and about the 5 elements actually. So the first one is the earth element, which is I do. And the first principle is what I said earlier. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So show up in your body. Don't be somewhere else than your body is. This is where my body is. This is where I am now. The second one is empty, empty, happy, happy. It's like when there's emptiness, then joy gets its chance to move through you because you're not caught in it the way it should be, the way you want it to be. You're empty, so then you're happy. So very simple. And then the third one is being curious. Or staying curious because we were curious. We are, I would say, we stay curious. So it's going back to the innocence of a young child, which is the water element. Sorry, going back one. The empty, empty, happy, happy is the metal element. And then the wood element is about community and growth. So that's about be a benevolent presence to each other. So that's about the kindness. So we've tapped into a lot of these. And the fifth one is about expression. So it's about believing yourself. So it sort of like says that, in the plant kingdom, the tree is here. The roots are here, the branches are here, the leaves are here, everything is here for the tree to flower. That's the reason it's here. The same way the humans are here to flower. They're here to express. That's what flowering is, an expression. So we're here to express to ourselves. That's what we're here for in our own unique way. So we need to believe in ourselves for that expression to happen. So they're the five elements. So they're the five principles, basically.
Yeah, I love them. And what I'd love to ask about that last one about expression, and to circle all the way back to the how I started the podcast. I think something that I struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with, who are being seen, who are pursuing the role as a teacher, and putting every aspect of yourself on display, and often being misunderstood. How do you approach that of starting to build a presence around a community or online and being misunderstood? Have people seeing you as, doing these things and because they don't have the proper information to understand why you're doing certain things, being understood, but still having the confidence to move forward and not letting, the whole crabs in the bucket thing pull, what I mean? Like, how do you overcome that and stay invigorated for that path?
Yeah, I make a pact to myself. I'm not thinking about other people's thinking. I'm not thinking about your thinking. I've got an investment. I know what I'm invested in. I know what my intention is, and that's what matters to me. I'm not thinking about your thinking. And people will misunderstand you. There are even people that won't like you, but I'm not going to make it sticky business by making their business my business. My intention is pure. It's for the goodness of all human beings, and I don't doubt that one bit. I don't need another person to sort of like put their hand up and verify that to give me any tick. So I don't get caught in that quagmire of sticky business. And it's easy to be an approval addict and look for people's validation. And I've moved through that before, and I saw how that didn't serve me. And not saying that it won't come up again. It still does come up. I'll just laugh at myself. Thinking about other people's thinking again. There it goes. There's my old pattern of,
Yeah.
And we're human beings. There's an egoic, there is an egoic being there. I'm just not going to let it shackle me. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a lot of people try to just go on the big thing. It's like, I don't care what anyone thinks. And I've never been able to do that.
No, I can't. I don't. I care. I do care, but I'm not. I'm going to say I'm not over because I do care. I would be lying to myself if I didn't. I wouldn't be on there if I didn't care.
Yeah,
I'd be hiding in the
exactly. Yeah, it is another paradox. You're doing the stuff you're doing because you care.
Yeah.
And so obviously, yeah.
But I'm also in the understanding is that there's people's complete. There's people's perceptions, and you're not going to make everyone happy, and I'm okay about that. There's people who have their perceptions. They'll have the people that don't like what you say, that hate you for what you do, whatever. But that's just the whole thing. I don't care. I don't say I don't care about it, but I'm not investing my time into that, and I can see how that can take me down if I put too much time into it. The more, as you'll notice, the more you get yourself out there, it's like the bigger the tree, the more people want to prune it. It's the way there is.
100%. Yeah, it's like when you make a splash, it splashes in all directions. It doesn't just go the direction you want it to. It's going to ripple in all directions, and some people aren't going to be happy with that. So, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, bro. Well, so if people want to find out more about what you do, and especially like your upcoming book, where would people? I'll post the links in the show episode description. But if there anything else you want to finish off on, and
it's all good. Like the 3 books is the Zen of Touch, which I did about 12 years ago. It's more therapeutic based. You probably wouldn't be interested in it if you weren't a body worker. It's more focused on the ZenThai Shiatsu. You can say it's a toolbox book. It's about the toolbox story. Connection to Source is a storybook of lots of stories based on a lot of Hindu mythologies. You'd probably be interested in that one, the Connection to Source. There's a lot of books that stories that I was like sharing in classes and festivals for years, and some really great ones. Not too many personal stories. There's lots of stories about Ram and Hanuman, and there's a lot of Zen master stories in there, and that's great. And then my last one that will be out at the end of the year, that's what I'm aiming for, is the 5 principles of living an undivided life, from ripples to waves. So it's really, and it's looking at this mental health pandemic that's out, if I like, and it'll be journaling. So it'll be an active book where you'll be asked to participate and write and circle and do things in margins and things like that. So look out for that one. I'll let you know when the invite. We'll have a book launch, I'm sure, in December. So I'll get you along.
Awesome, bro. I'll look forward to that. And just to finish off, going with the Hanuman vibe and theme, if someone listening to this is feeling a little bit like ungrounded or off balance or a little bit lost, like how would you help them to find like that devotional element of Hanuman, which with also that playful kind of aspect to it? Like what advice would you give someone to kind of reconnect with what is their own meaning of life, or what is their own like inner fire or something like that, inner devotion?
I think if you want to talk about this Hanuman energy, which I really love that this has come up, is what here is that, a lot of mental stories and mental restlessness and mental and emotional problems don't happen or weren't happening in the East. Why? Because most of them are focused on something other than themselves. Serving their family, going out and getting an animal to bring home to the village, going to make a garden that would then feed their family. So a really beautiful thing to do is don't get too caught up in what's not working for you. Go out there and put some energy into helping someone else, I call it othering, and that can be just all that's needed. And unconditionally, don't say, well, I've got to get paid $20 for this. I'm going to do this because there's this incredible call I've got to do to help someone that doesn't have the opportunity that I do. So, maybe put some time into supporting something other than yourself, and that can be a really great, simple remedy.
Yeah, wow.
Because now someone else is in the middle rather than you being in the middle, someone else, and you're putting your focus on that.
Well, exactly what you just said, and that's so prominent now. We all interact mainly through social media, and what do you see when you first log onto your social media? You see your profile, your picture, all that sort of stuff. So you're always analyzing yourself and how everyone else perceives you. That's like the goal in the Western world these days. So yeah, you've touched on something really, really, really like profound, like really important there. So so thanks for that, bro. And that I agree. Like trying to
so good. I did treatments at markets for years. The best treatments I ever did, I don't know if you remember the 2004 tsunami thing that wiped out a lot of India. It was terrible. I think I did a whole month of treating. I gave all the money away. I gave it all. And, I always had 3 kids at the time. I was floating the whole month because everything I was doing in my body work and classes, I was passing on, and I was floating because it was all for someone other than me. People I didn't know. It was people that were, there were people in India without a mattress to lie on.
Yeah.
And you don't recognize that the shift that you get energetically, and even with your awareness, when you start doing things again, being a benevolent presence for each other. Yeah. humans, and yeah, it all comes around, man. It all comes around.
Yeah, definitely. No, I resonate with that a lot, bro. I went before I started to teach yoga, I was teaching fitness classes, and I was at a pretty dark, like depressive state. And the only thing that was really like picking me up is teaching. And it didn't really occur to me, like, because I was not focused on all my stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny that all the stuff was still there, but yet I felt different about it because exactly what you said, I was focused on helping just for that 1 hour.
Yeah.
But that was, my state shifted for the rest of the day after that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, bro. So yeah, thank you so much, Gwyn, for taking the time to jump on with me. I've been wanting to chat with you for a long time.
Nice.
And yeah, it was great, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, and all the best with all your endeavors. I know you're making some good shifts out there and good impacts with good people. So all the
Thanks,
best.
brother.
What you're
Really
doing,
appreciate that.
Thanks a love. Enjoy.
Thanks a lot, brother. Thank you.
I'll see you around soon.
Thank you for listening, for hanging out with us, and for being a part of this episode of Make Yoga Magic Again, the official podcast of Ritual Embodiment and the House of Mages. A massive thank you to Gwyn Williams for being my guest for this episode. If you're curious and interested to see what Gwyn does, you can get in touch with him via the link in the show notes. Everything you need to get in touch with Gwyn and find out more about what he's currently doing is all in there. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Ritual Embodiment and the House of Mages, our link to our website is in the show notes, or you can find us at ritualembodiment.com. Thank you again. I will speak to you soon, and until then, make yoga magic again.